Good evening. He has flown a quarter of the way around the world from Israel to New York and tomorrow will deliver his response to a ceasefire plan from his key allies. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has a date at the United Nations. Early morning hopes that he was prepared to consider a mainly American and French plan for a 21-day halt in the fighting fell as the sun rose. Mr. Netanyahu said that Israel won't stop launching airstrikes against Hezbollah in Lebanon with what he called full force until its goals are achieved. And in one such attack today on a block of flats in the Lebanese capital Beirut, Israel said it had killed the head of Hezbollah's drone operation. It was again just one of many across Lebanon. Another 60 Lebanese people were reported killed.
Even with talk of peace, the road to the south was deserted. It wasn't long before we came across the business of war. Casualties being brought down from villages under bombardment. As the Americans were briefing there might be a ceasefire, the strikes on the south were relentless. Soon after, Israel declared the fight would go on, and so it did.
The bombardment on the mountain range just behind me has been almost continual. You might have heard another one there. First we hear the jets, then the boom, then the smoke. Along that mountain range are around 40 villages.
Many of the people whose homes were in those villages are now in shelters, wondering when or if they will get to return. Our wish is that everything will calm down, this crisis will be solved, and we'll be victorious, God willing, she says. Any hope of that seems distant, the Hezbollah MP adamant on the group's position.
Our position as Hezbollah, as Hassan Nasrallah said, is that as long as there is no ceasefire in Gaza, all the resistance fronts will not stop confronting Israel.
The explosions are so relentless now, the children barely flinch.
We saw what's happening in Gaza, and all the world is very strange, really. Just watching and like the flock. Doing speeches, but nothing, no action on the ground. So people have the right to be afraid.
Even in the places of supposed safety, there is little of it.
Let's go, let's go, let's go.
Let's go. We've just been filming with displaced people, but all around them explosions were going off. This part of Sur is known as the Belt of Fire now.
In Beirut, the assassinations of senior Hezbollah commanders continue. This strike said to have killed the head of the drone unit. CCTV captured the impact of one of the strikes. In Baalbek, multiple villages were struck. It's not just fighters dying in this war, but civilians too, dying in their homes. Ali Moshin was 2 months old when he was killed alongside his father and mother. Yunus Nasser and Fatima Nasser had travelled to Lebanon to visit their new grandson. They died shortly after meeting him. Tonight, arriving in the United States, the Israeli Prime Minister vowed the strikes would go on. Meanwhile, Hezbollah continued its own attacks towards Israel.
Well, we'll speak to Emma in just a moment. We're first now to John in Tel Aviv. And John, I suppose this morning it felt we were on the verge of a ceasefire, potentially, with Israel appearing to support one. Tonight we're back talking about ground invasions, potentially. What happened?
Julie, I think hopes for a ceasefire have been dashed on the altar of Israeli politics. And you're right, early this morning things did sound promising. The Americans in particular had good reason to make positive noises. According to the White House, Israeli officials actually helped draft the ceasefire proposal. But here in Israel today, extremists within the government began criticising the plan and suggesting that they might actually topple the government if there is any sort of ceasefire with Hezbollah. According to the White House, Mr. Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, was fully on board last night, but he radically changed his tune today, Julie. Instead of talking about a ceasefire, he talked about the offensive against Hezbollah being prosecuted with full force. There may be another reason that Mr. Netanyahu actually doesn't want a ceasefire with Hezbollah. As you know, the conduct of the war in Gaza has been controversial and divisive here. Well, the offensive against Hezbollah is not divisive in any shape or form. It has widespread support, it's unifying Israelis, and presumably Mr. Netanyahu thinks it may be boosting his popularity, which may make him want to continue this war for a while yet.
OK, John, thank you for that. Let's go then back to Emma in southern Lebanon for us tonight. And Emma, it's clearly been brutal for many villages in the area where you've been today, but with Hezbollah not shifting their position either. What's the feeling where you are about the politics of this?
Well, without question, Hezbollah are exactly where they've been pretty much for the last year. They say that they will keep on fighting as long as there is fighting in Gaza. If there's a ceasefire then, well, at that point they would consider changing their position, but they're certainly not anywhere near that at this point. In terms of the wider situation, this area is very Hezbollah leaning. It's a Shia population. And speaking to people here, it's very clear that they do not want war. They fear the consequences of it. They fear the displacement. They fear the humanitarian catastrophe that could happen. But they are driven by an antipathy towards Israel, and that will override their feelings and their fears when it comes to all-out war. In terms of the politics that we're seeing abroad, the international community's discussions, it's interesting how big a disconnect there seems to be. People here are more worried about getting through the day and the night than they are about the politics. All they want to know is whether this is going to get worse and whether or not they're going to survive.
OK, Emma, thank you very much indeed for that.